Following the horrifying evidence presented throughout the preliminary hearing in the case against David Anthony Burke, a Los Angeles judge ruled that there was enough evidence to proceed to trial. If he's found guilty of taking the life of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez, David possibly faces the death penalty. And throughout the 5-day preliminary hearing, prosecutors presented detailed testimony and evidence, including text messages between David and Celeste herself, as well as records of purchases that prosecutors believe may have been connected in an effort to conceal the murder. But even with all this evidence being presented, the world still has more questions than answers. And in the days since the hearing concluded, more new horrifying details continue to emerge. So we'll review it all and understand if David may truly face the death penalty. I think what's first most important to understand is how David's defense team will attempt to poke holes in the prosecution's case. David has pleaded not guilty, and that doesn't mean that his defense team has to prove that he did not take Celeste's life. Instead, they must show a jury that there is not enough evidence to concretely say that David did take her life. And even though we know, based off the hundreds of text messages between David and Celeste, that they were engaged in some sort of relationship, the key question which will determine David's fate is whether or not he truly took that child's life.
In my legal opinion, the prosecution has a lot. If they're trying to prove that David had an illegal sexual relationship with a minor over a period of time, when LAPD detective Corey Farrell was on the stand, he went through all of these alleged sexually explicit photos reportedly on David's phone. I'm not even going to get too specific on this, but basically, it was alleged these were images of the singer engaging in sex acts with Celeste. Naked photos, text messages about Plan B, pregnancy, and abortion, sexual positions, the relationship, emergency contraception. And Farrell says the dates of these conversations with sexual references began all the way back in November of 2023 and continued until March of 2025. Just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, David's phone at one point purportedly texted, because, I can't say definitively that David was saying this, right? It's David's phone. Maybe the defense would suggest that somebody else was using it. Maybe tough to argue. David's phone apparently sends a message to Celeste's phone, and it's basically a message asking if it's his. So you would basically make the argument that you're talking about a baby. Celeste's phone responds, "Of course it's yours, David." And to be clear about what a defense could be, and this came out during the preliminary hearing, where Deputy DA Beth Silverman, the prosecutor in this case, made the point that even if Celeste had lied to David about her age, it doesn't matter. It doesn't absolve him of criminal liability, that is still sexual abuse of a child.
This is what makes the case so haunting, in that regardless of whether David is proven guilty or innocent on the dismemberment and murder charges, one thing is for certain based off the evidence that prosecutors presented, and that is that David had a highly inappropriate relationship with this child. But when it comes to the charges related to the dismemberment and unlawful mutilation of human remains, throughout the preliminary hearing, detectives had testified that chainsaws, a mop system, cadaver bags, and a blue inflatable pool were all supposedly ordered to David's home under a fake name just days after Celeste passed away. A DNA expert had also testified that evidence from what looked like bloodstains in the home's garage matched DNA consistent with Celeste. A criminologist also testified about mats at David's place that had straight-line cuts and stains that tested positive for possible blood. There was evidence of an alleged trash bag containing stained wipes. There was a blue inflatable pool that allegedly had cuts in it. There was also blue plastic fragments found with Celeste's remains that were said to match the inflatable pool that David had reportedly ordered, the very pool that was later found at his place. And David's Tesla, where Celeste's remains were discovered, reportedly had 11 air fresheners inside of it. Testing had also found possible blood in that Tesla. We also know that on the night that Celeste's life was believed to be taken, on April 23rd, 2025 into the morning of April 24th. There was testimony that digital data allegedly showed that the Tesla that David owned, that Celeste's body was found in, actually traveled to Santa Barbara, and Celeste's passport card was reportedly found in Santa Barbara County. I say all this to say, there's tons of evidence that prosecutors have already presented that challenge the idea that David is not guilty in this case. But how exactly does David's team plan to poke holes in all the evidence that'll be presented at trial? The first problem is the fact that there is a heavy lack of witnesses and surveillance on the night that prosecutors actually believe Celeste had lost her life. We do know that there were alleged text messages between David and Celeste on that night, where David had allegedly ordered Celeste an Uber to his house. She snuck out of hers. She made it to David's house at around 10 p.m., and he texted her that the gate is open. But after that, he started texting her phone around 30 minutes later, asking where she was, if she made it there safely. And Celeste's phone was never active again. But surely a mansion in the Hollywood Hills would have some surveillance cameras. The Uber driver that drove Celeste to David's home might remember if she even made it there alive. You would think with the insane amount of evidence they have against David that surely there'd be some inkling of proof or footage of Celeste's whereabouts on that night. Well, there isn't, and that's what David's team might use to their advantage.
Detective Farrell confirms that there was no surveillance video of Celeste or David at the residence that night. There was no presentation of witnesses seeing Celeste enter that home on Doheny Place. And while the prosecution asserts that David arranged for an Uber to pick Celeste up that night to take her to his place, and reportedly there was a text conversation about that, including texts about the address, the Uber's arrival, the gate door being unlocked, apparently, the Uber driver could not definitively say that he dropped Celeste off at this house. Detective Farrell testified that nobody saw Celeste get out of the Uber that night. No one testified, as of yet, that they saw the killing or watched Celeste die. There were no witnesses called regarding that specific 20-minute or so period of time, that window at night when prosecutors believe Celeste was murdered after allegedly arriving at David's place. Now, what could the prosecution do? They could couple the text message exchange between Celeste and David with location data on the phone, potentially map it to the purchase of items from David afterwards, or allegedly from David afterwards, and use the allegation that there is no more activity from Celeste's phone to put out a timeline of when she allegedly arrived and when she was allegedly killed. That's how they even get to that 20-minute window. And yes, cases can be brought and won on circumstantial evidence alone. You and I both know that. You don't always need direct evidence like surveillance footage or an eyewitness, but we're talking potential gaps here. And that brings us to another important point. Assuming she goes into the house, what happened? How do you know it was first-degree murder with special circumstances? Neither Detective Farrell nor the deputy medical examiner could precisely say what happened. And that is complicated by the fact that no murder weapon was ever recovered. And to give you an idea of what I mean, you go to the cross-examination of Dr. Grant Ho, this deputy medical examiner that I mentioned. This is when the defense was questioning him, because the defense asked if advanced decomposition, which we have in this case, can affect the accuracy of drug results in toxicology testing. The witness says potentially. The defense asked if it's helpful to know whether a person has a mental health history, whether they're suicidal, whether they're a habitual drug user while preparing an autopsy report. The witness says potentially. Dr. Ho didn't apparently speak with relatives about these characteristics or potential characteristics. And the defense, as far as we could see, seemed to insinuate on cross-examination, is it possible that Celeste may have stabbed herself, that she may have done something to herself? You know, defense attorney Marilyn Benarski had Dr. Ho establish that he cannot rule out that the two penetrating wounds, which he claimed were the cause of death, occurred within seconds of each other. Quote, you cannot determine whether Miss Hernandez was holding the knife that caused the two wounds, correct? Correct. You can't rule that out, right? So that is a consideration, but we would expect to find hesitation marks. And then he was asked, is it fair to say that you don't know the circumstances under which these wounds occurred? And he replied, correct. Assuming, of course, it's a knife, right? We don't have the murder weapon. That leaves room for reasonable doubt. That leaves room for the defense to explore. And we have to imagine the defense could bring in their own pathologist to testify to maybe a different cause of death rather than multiple penetrating wounds, or maybe even a different manner of death other than homicide. Now, where do they get this idea of her allegedly doing this to herself? Well, you heard that line of questioning about mental health, right? It was reported that the defense attorney asked Detective Farrell if Celeste had a history of domestic violence, whether there were messages referencing alleged mental health issues about Celeste. And while the judge wouldn't permit the presentation of that evidence at this stage of the proceedings, it is possible that could come out at a trial. But you couple that with the text messages, or the apparent text messages from April 22nd to the 23rd, 2025. Again, this is the time period that we're talking about, the key moment when Celeste was allegedly killed. These were highlighted by the defense on cross-examination of Farrell. They arguably show that Celeste was demanding to see David before he traveled abroad, that she begged to see him in person, that he tells her no. This would defeat the narrative that he allegedly lured her to the property to kill her. And then Detective Farrell seemed to confirm that David says, okay, agrees to see Celeste on April 23rd, 2025. And after she sends him this text, cut this S out, I'm seeing you today. Now, Blair Burke, David's attorney, reads this allegedly threatening text from Celeste that was dated April 22nd, allegedly telling David that she will end his career and tell her father, quote, so many lies about him, that she's going to mutilate his quote, I will tell my dad so many bleeping lies about you, dead ass. I will end your career and your life. I will damage anything. She allegedly sent this on April 22nd. Now, Burke apparently also read a text from Celeste explicitly threatening to make anonymous accusations and, quote, leak all that S I got on you. And this is apparently in reference to whether or not David was going to post on Aysia Collins' social media accounts showing the two of them together. There seemed to be an insinuation that she was jealous of this person. Aysia Collins is somebody who we've talked about before, apparently in David's orbit. And Celeste apparently told David she has his contact information, his mother's number, threatening to release all this information. And then you have texts like this where Celeste allegedly wrote to David in August of 2024, I care about you. I killed my kid for you. I don't like talking about it because it gets me really upset, but I do anything to have it back.
Now, this is where things can get very nuanced on both sides of the case. Remember the name Aysia Collins. She's another individual who David was associated with, and based on text messages allegedly between David and Celeste, it was possible Celeste was jealous of her. We'll review that later in this video, but to float the idea around that Celeste had threatened to expose David or even unalive him, that brings a very interesting point to be argued on both sides. From the prosecutor's perspective, if Celeste really was attempting to expose David for having this relationship with her when she was underage, and that's what led David to take her life, well, that wouldn't just be murder. That'd be murder with intent for financial gain, and that could lead him to the death penalty. But on the opposing side, David's defense can argue that she insisted on seeing David that night. She was threatening him. Examiners couldn't say for certain that the wounds on her remains came from David directly. The defense really might try and argue that she was mentally unstable and did this to herself.
I got to call something out here too. If you recall, in one of the prosecution's filings, they alleged that David stood by while Celeste bled out. How do they know that? How are they going to prove that? It wasn't like they called an eyewitness who saw that. It wasn't like they had surveillance footage to prove that, at least as of yet. How can they allege that? How can they allege that this was first-degree murder with all these special circumstances? Actually, let me highlight something else from the defense during questioning of the deputy medical examiner. Because when you think about the state of decomposition and dismemberment, that's an issue. Dr. Ho testified that he's willing to say she had been dead for weeks because there are weeks and months, but he couldn't say that she had been dead for months because there are no months and weeks. In other words, you have a witness who can't say certainly how long Celeste had been dead before her remains were discovered. So he cannot pinpoint the exact date of her death as April 23rd, 2025, based on the autopsy. And if the defense can convince the jury that she was alive past April 23rd, that's going to be significant. And when you think about what those in his orbit, David's orbit, could testify to, one of the potential deficits in this case is that I don't recall any testimony yet that David texted or communicated with anyone about an intent to kill Celeste, or that he was afraid of her, or that he wanted to keep her quiet. or that he admitted to anything. Is that going to come out? Maybe. I mean, I just go back to what attorney Bednarski, defense attorney, said to the court at the prelim. After days of testimony, the evidence only shows a young woman's body was transported and concealed. And while this circumstantial evidence supports concealment of a death, it doesn't support a killing or the requisite intent, forethought that would make it first-degree murder, that the law recognizes two forms of malice. And her argument was neither. And then if you don't have either, there's no murder. Express malice was a deliberate intention to take away a life, and she argued there was no evidence showing deliberate intention here from David. She argued there's no statement of intent anywhere to harm her. There was no history of violence or hostility from him to her. How the relationship, the evidence listed here, is the opposite of homicidal malice. She also argued there was no implied malice. There was no considerable provocation. And she says, counter that, if you look at provocation, it was from Celeste to David, that she was the threatening one. She argued that the three special circumstances allegations that would make this first-degree murder charge eligible for the death penalty are unconstitutionally vague. How lying in wait, you look at the text messages that were presented, would arguably show Celeste called for the meeting during which prosecutors claimed she was killed. There was no surprise attack because she knew and expected David to be home, that he was online playing games when she came over there, or allegedly came over there. The other special circumstance allegation, murder for financial gain, she made the argument that David's prospective music career is not a concrete financial interest under California law, that there's no California precedent for anticipated future earnings. I think this one might have been a difficult argument, though, for the defense, considering you learned how much money he was making and he had his album. What about the third special circumstance, murder of a witness? Well, she argued there was nothing that showed a subjective belief that Celeste had any interest in being a witness or participant in any criminal investigation. Did she make it clear that she was going to work with prosecutors or work with police or go to the police? And she argued that all of Celeste's threats were to ruin him socially and professionally. Again, that she never said she was going to go to the police. Now, the prosecution countered that. The judge ultimately ruled there was enough to go forward for trial for now. But, I'm highlighting what could be issues at a trial.
So like I've been saying, there are more questions than answers. What could David's intent have been to take Celeste's life? And what did people around David and Celeste know about their relationship before Celeste lost her life? Well, for starters, Patrick Steinfeld, who's an attorney representing Celeste's family, he had told reporters, "I find it abhorrent that defense attorneys are trying to put any blame on this young child." And while I most definitely agree, what else is the defense supposed to do when you have all this evidence pinning David to Celeste? By these text messages, it's almost obvious that they were in a multi-year relationship. How does the defense argue against that? Keep in mind that Celeste also went missing multiple times. Judging by those text messages, it was likely, allegedly, David and his security guard who were packing bags for her and arranging her to sneak out of her home, picking her up in the middle of the night and bringing her to David's house. But she didn't just go to David's house. She traveled the world with him. And as a minor, your guardians or parents need to sign a consent form to allow you to travel without them out of the country. And David ended up bringing Celeste to London. How was he able to do that? Well, Stephen Fisher, who's been a private investigator on the case, claims that this was much more than David simply sneaking Celeste out of the country. You have to keep in mind, when you have a child who's constantly running away, it's very hard to discipline them, to stop them from entering dangerous environments. But Steve Fisher claims that both Celeste and David's family knew about the relationship the entire time.
Do you think the family is as quiet as they are because they knew who David was and they knew who she was going to, and you don't really see too much of an intervention between them?
I mean, yes. I have proof that family members have been to that rental house before, have been with David and Celeste.
Wait, her family has been to his house?
Family members. Listen, one of the first things I put down in this case was we know that David and Celeste were at Six Flags on a certain date, and we found a Build-A-Bear certificate from the Build-A-Bear place in Six Flags in her cousin's name at the house. So it's like, wait a minute. So she wasn't really missing. You want to know, in my opinion, what the missing persons report was about? It was to cover their ass so CPS didn't come in and say, hey, she's not going to school. What's up? If she's a missing person, you say she's not going to the school because she's a missing person. Then you don't have CPS in your life at that moment. Listen, I sympathize. I know that they're grieving. I know they lost a daughter, but goddamn, she shouldn't have been allowed to be. She was gone a year and a half, man. A year and a half. Like, somebody should have said, maybe we shouldn't be letting Celeste live her own life like this.
But before you go blaming Celeste's parents for any of this, keep in mind again, this was a child who was constantly running away from home, who was extremely hard to discipline, and they likely did not know the extent of the situation their child was getting themselves in. Did they know David's age? Did they know exactly where Celeste was running off to all those months that she was reported missing, that her family was putting up missing person posters all throughout their town? Well, Trapler Ross, who was actually sitting in on the preliminary hearing, he breaks down the evidence that was presented and emphasizes that it would be very difficult to put any blame on Celeste's family when it comes to the situation that Celeste got herself in with David. Keep in mind, her family has also attended every single day of the preliminary hearing, listening to all of the horrifying evidence about how their child's remains were found, and simultaneously, David's parents have not attended a single court hearing.
But let me tell you exactly what was said and how crafty the prosecution were when it came to kind of framing the parents, and then I'll show you some of what people are saying, which I think is interesting. Basically, David's defense attorney didn't show any hard evidence for a lot of this, just asked the detective questions that were asked in a very smart way, and you got to give respect to Blair Burke and the defense team. They were very smart. See, a lot of the time it's like we heard statements and then we were shown specific evidence, but in this they asked very broad questions in a very smart strategic order to the LAPD detective that was responsible for this case while on the stand, and the order that they asked these questions in made it seem a lot more like the family had an involvement in what was going on. So the first thing they asked in this line of questioning, they said, was David known to Celeste's family? And the detective said yes. Now that's very broad. David being known to Celeste's family, that doesn't mean they approved of the relationship, doesn't mean they knew of the relationship, doesn't mean that they even knew that David was a grown man, right? As we have found out during the during the hearings, that David was a massive liar, and unfortunately, rest in peace to her, but Celeste was a liar too. There was allegations that Celeste had said that her age was 16, 17, 18, but we saw cold hard evidence that David had at least been informed in a roundabout way from the body cam footage on February the 17th, 2024, that Celeste was 13, all right, likely 13. They said, pretty sure she's 13. And he acknowledged, he said, people are saying she's 13, but she told me she was 18. Bear in mind, this is amid the context of basically like David having Operation Awesome, a plan with his security guard to come and kidnap her in the middle of the night from her family home, with the help of a security guard in the middle of the night, and giving her bags to basically pack all of her belongings so she can move out the family home. Does that sound like a family that's aware of the relationship and supportive of the relationship, that he's having to come with security in the night and sneak her out of her home to move her away, and then within 2-3 days of that happening, the police are knocking on the door informing him that she's 13 and she's hiding somewhere else? Does that sound like the family knew what was going on or approved of what was going on? No. All they said was David's known to Celeste's family. Now, that's nothing new, because we knew that Celeste's father, once she saw the news about David and the remains being found in his car, he contacted the police saying, I think that might be my daughter. Now, that doesn't mean that Celeste hadn't potentially lied to her parents. That doesn't mean that maybe the parents knew about the relationship and they were doing everything in their power to stop it, but Celeste basically was just constantly giving them the runaround, running away, being kidnapped by David and his security, going missing. The police were coming knocking, looking for her numerous times. So that was a massive misrepresentation. The next question, they said, okay, and they phrased this very well. Now, listen very carefully to the exact words that I'm about to say. Blair asked the detective, after the initial missing persons report, Celeste's parents allowed her to live away from home in May 2024 with her aunt in the same city that David lived in. Now, a lot of people have taken that to say, the detective said yes. Oh, that means that the parents allowed her to go and live with her boyfriend, who was an adult. They approved of they basically sent her off packing. Well, that's not what was said, was it? What was said was after that missing persons report, so after they have this problem with her constantly running away, they allowed her to go and live with her aunt in the same city, LA County, that David lived in. That doesn't mean anything. So she wasn't sent to live with David. And they didn't ask the detective, was she allowed by her parents to go and live with David? Because the answer probably would have been no. And there would have been no evidence to that. And bear in mind, when she asks this, when she says, was David known to Celeste's family? And the detective says yes. They're not showing any proof of this. No proof. When she said after the missing persons report, was Celeste allowed to go and live away from home with her aunt in the LA County area, in the same city that David lived in, not in David's house, not approved, not allowed, not with express permission to go and live with her adult boyfriend, all right? And they showed no proof. They didn't show proof. They didn't show a permission slip. They didn't show anything to say that she had been allowed to go and live with David, who was an adult, while she was a minor. That's not what was said. So now people have said, oh, she was sold off. Oh, she was coming back with money. Oh, she was... That's not what was said at all, okay? You got to focus on what they didn't say, because if they had better evidence, they would have brought it up. They were bringing up the best stuff they possibly could. So they said David was known to Celeste's family. Yes, we already knew that because Celeste's father called the police and said, I think that's my daughter, when he saw the news of a body found in Singer David's trunk. She asked the detective point blank, aunts and cousins knew about the relationship, right? And the detective said yes. So she didn't say the parents knew about the relationship, did she? She said aunts and cousins knew about the relationship. If the parents knew about the relationship, she would have asked, she would have said point blank, did the parents know about the relationship? Blair did not ask that because there was no evidence to that, and there would be absolutely no proof of that. She asked specifically about aunts and cousins.
So as you can see, David's defense team was not specifically asking if Celeste's parents actually knew who David was. And while family members may have been aware that Celeste was dating someone by the name of David, no evidence in court was shown to prove that her parents knew she was seeing this 20-year-old famous singer. And if Celeste's parents truly knew about Celeste's relationship with David, best believe with the hardball that David's defense team is playing, they would have asked that question in court to get testimony that Celeste's family knew what she was doing.
Hey, excuse me, man, quick question. Oh, shit. What are you up to?
You call me my work clothes, bro. You know, I just got the tie. I'm trying to clean up a little bit.
You think Tyler's gonna get all that out?
I hope so.
What's your name?
David.
How are you feeling today?
It's raining outside. I think I got a cold. I'm kind of sick.
What song do you put on when you're in bed and feeling sick?
Romantic homicide.
How does that one go?
I'm scared. It feels like you don't care.
But aside from Celeste's whereabouts, we also have to examine the evidence the prosecution does have. The Uber driver was unable to confirm whether or not he dropped Celeste off. There's no surveillance footage showing Celeste walking into David's home that night. Just those eerie texts where David tells her the front gate is open, but then 30 minutes later, he texts her phone saying, "Where you at?" as if she never arrived, or as if David was trying to cover it up. We definitely know someone was covering something up, because again, the very Tesla that Celeste's remains were found in drove on the night that prosecutors believe she lost her life, all the way from the Hollywood Hills to Santa Barbara to dump off Celeste's passport. A random driver had found it in the bushes on a highway. This was someone deliberately attempting to hide Celeste's identity, and what's even more disturbing is the fact that while the prosecution has proof of a bunch of different chainsaws, knives, the pool being ordered to David's home, they didn't actually present proof of what could possibly have been the murder weapon used in taking Celeste's life. Now, the YouTuber Mark the Shark, he actually went to the exact spot in Santa Barbara where Celeste's passport was found, and this is a random remote road with a bunch of forest within it. It's really eerie to think that aside from Celeste's passport, if she truly did lose her life on that night, maybe David had tossed the murder weapon out in that exact same area.
This is the
pictures all uploaded.
Crazy we saw this in court.
This is where they found Celeste with his passport, man. I'm getting like the heebie-jeebies, or however you say it, the heebie-jeebies. Yeah, this is the exact passport spot. Well, it's like right up here. I'm gonna show you guys. Don't touch anything, call it in. Yeah, it's right there, look, right there. So let me see if I can, just wanna be very careful. This right here.
Crazy. That's exactly what we saw in court.
I don't know, how can you search this whole area? I mean, there's a path right there. There's a path right there. I should wear my vest. There's a path right here, which is interesting. There's a path going down. And then this is where they found right there. One of the exhibits they had, this is where it is right here. Look, this is an exhibit photo that was shown in court that said that the passport card was found here, and the officer's pointing like this. This is exactly how it looks, like that, something like that. So this is weird, man. I thought this was gonna be isolated, more, but yeah, because I remember this because of the tree. I remember the tree right there, that right there I remember, and that I remember. And I remember the guy going like this, and they asked him, what is that, is that your hand? And he's like, yeah, that's my hand. So this is what it looked like, the exhibit like that. It's a random spot, but it's pretty busy. Look, it's really busy, which is surprising. It's really busy. I don't know if he just tossed it out, but this would have been a spot right here that he would have parked right in this area. Right here. Because I remember the 50-mile-per-hour sign right there. There's a path that leads over there, but this is the area right here that he could have parked, maybe tossed it out the window. But what else is down here? But it's strange, man. This is strange. But there are several spots that I found coming up here that there are places that you can.
They said on the night Celeste died, David drove 102 miles in 2 hours, 15 minutes or so to dump Celeste's passport location. So the thing is, he went there 3 times. And what we don't know is, you know, he drove to Santa Barbara, stopped loads of times, or didn't stop loads of times, but he pinged loads of different cell towers all the way up the coast. We don't know how many times he stopped. We don't know exactly when he stopped, where he stopped, how, why, which parts. There were a couple bits that looked almost like little mini detours. The chainsaw could be absolutely anywhere along this route and branching off of it in all types of directions. Super, super spooky, super weird, but that is exactly what the picture that was shown in court looks like. This is literally, but it was daytime. It's a bit brighter. It's a lot more sunlit.
Now, what you guys have to remember is that this case has not yet been taken to trial. At the preliminary hearing, prosecutors did not present all the evidence that they have against David. It was just enough to convince a judge that there was enough evidence to take it to court. That could mean that throughout the trial, people within David's circle are eventually called to the stand. His parents, his siblings, his collaborators, and his friends. And what's most peculiar is the fact that on the day that Celeste lost her life, she was arguing with David via text messages about a woman named Aysia. Aysia in particular is Aysia Collins, a model and streamer who was associated with David. The argument about Aysia is allegedly what led Celeste to David's home the night that her life was taken. This will play a key role in the trial because, again, while I do not agree with this at all, David's defense team will likely use the angle that Celeste was so jealous over David's friendship with this Aysia woman that it led her to threaten to unalive him and expose all his secrets, and then led her to his house, where the defense may argue that she ended up taking her own life. Now, will a jury believe this? Probably not. But it's interesting to unpack what Aysia actually knew about not just David, but his relationship with Celeste. Did she know Celeste? Did she know Celeste's age? Well, recently, Aysia has attempted to give her side of the story, starting off with how she actually met David.
With David, I met David when I was modeling on a set. I got hired as a model on his set. We hung out, we were friends, and then I got hired as a stylist on his tour. And because of that, people think that, like, I was somehow linked to this murder of Celeste Rivas, which is horrible. I haven't been able to dive into the exact details of everything because I've been trying to be super respectful to the investigation and to Celeste Rivas's death, also to all of the like the trial and the investigators. Like, you realize legally I can't really talk too much about things. All I can really say is like, no, we never dated. We used to be friends, but obviously when I found everything out, we stopped being friends. Like, do you think I still support this guy? No.
Now, it's interesting that she brings up how she can't really comment on everything because it's an open investigation. Given the text messages we saw between David and Celeste on Celeste's final day on Earth, it's possible that Aysia will be called to the stand as a witness to recap what she knew about David's relationship with Celeste. But it wasn't just Aysia. There were various other streamers, content creators, singers who were all associated with David. One of them, Neon, David's old friend, was actually arrested for failure to appear as a witness when a grand jury had convened on the case months before David was even arrested. And Aysia emphasizes that all the people in David's circle do not condone his actions, but are deeply affected by this case, regardless.
And when all this stuff came out about David and them, it was really, really frustrating and honestly just difficult because a lot of people were affected. That's what a lot of people are not going to understand. Like people are attacking Jason for the David thing. All Jason did was make some songs with bro. Maybe they were friends, but why are people blaming David's actions on Jason? Sakura was at Jason or David's house with me on the 4th of July party. Does that mean that David's actions equal Sakura? No. And I've never wanted anyone to get attacked for David's actions. And I'm vouching for people because people like myself, like I'm getting attacked as well for things. And all I'm trying to do is get justice for Celeste Rivas. Like, I feel like we're putting eyes on the wrong thing, the unimportant things, especially. And it's been really, really difficult for me. It's been really difficult for a lot of people. Like, I know some creators were getting attacked for even mentioning that they felt uncomfortable that David's been in their home before and stuff like that. But they're valid for feeling uncomfortable. Like, I think this is a crazy situation and it's horrible.
Aysia also says that she has been fully cooperative with authorities and that her ultimate goal is to get justice for Celeste and her family. Simultaneously, she's in absolute shock because the David that she knew was this nice, caring person. And to find out he could have not only been behind a crime so horrific like taking a child's life, but also could have been in a relationship with this child, spent years helping her run away from her parents' house to be with him, that makes it all the more haunting.
I didn't have any involvement with anything, and I've been fully cooperative with investigators and police and stuff like that because that's what I want to do. I want to get justice for Celeste Rivas. David blindsided all of his friends. All of us. Like, we're all just a little fucking confused because he portrayed himself to be this angel of a person, this great friend. So we're all like, what the fuck? I think we're all a little scared. I think when you deal with a person who's like a genuine psychopath for the first time, I mean, like an actual psychopath, you're fucking lost because you're like, what the hell just happened? I would have never thought in a million years he would do something like that. But that's the thing. That's like the common denominator between all of these fucking crazy ass people is you never fucking know what they're capable of because they would never show you that side of them. And like, people are like, oh, how is it that you just couldn't tell? What are you talking about? How could I not tell? When you're, for instance, like when you're dating someone, right? God, I never knew he was a cheater. Like, I can't believe he cheated on me. Or like when you're friends with someone and they stab you in the back and you're like, damn, I never thought they were capable of that. You'll never know what a person is capable of until they show you. That's just kind of how it works.
Aysia goes on to emphasize that she was actually on tour with David, and that's what makes it even more disturbing. is that you're working with, friends with, and traveling with this guy that you think is a good guy. And then this bombshell gets dropped on the world that he was potentially a PDF, a murderer, dismembered a child in such a horrific way. As much as we don't know about Alicia's involvement with David, by this point in time, you have to empathize with the fact that finding this information out along with the world about someone you thought was your friend has to be traumatic on incomprehensible levels.
There is one thing I do definitely want to talk about with the David situation. Which this is super difficult to speak about because I don't know what I'm allowed to talk about. The trial hasn't happened yet. That's one thing that is a really big deal. The trial has not started yet. I'm trying to be respectful. I was on the tour with David. I have been compliant with investigators, police, and everyone who has asked things of me. I've even put out a statement to the public on Reddit after I was getting a lot of death threats and harassment towards me and my family. So I don't know what more you guys want me to do. I've raised so much awareness about Celeste Rivas' death, and I feel for her and her family so fucking much. I'm trying not to fucking cry here, because obviously, like, you know, I think the worst thing about it is people, like, are not taking this shit serious. A little girl was killed. We need to take this serious. I just wish people would actually use their brains when it comes to stuff like this. Stop making fake AI evidence. Stop bringing people into this that have nothing to do with this. Like, oh my god, like, what more can I fucking say, bro? Like, I'm trying to talk about things. I'm trying to be straightforward. But this is all just like, this is fucking hell. This situation is hell. And hell for everyone who had to be around that dude.
Now, Aysia clarifies, again, she was very close friends with David. So much so to the point where she was even aware that David and Celeste were dating. However, she claims David had told her Celeste was of age. Again, it makes it so much more chilling because in my previous video where I broke down everything from the preliminary hearing, we saw that law enforcement showed up to David's home in 2024 and informed David how young Celeste was, and he still continued interacting with her for years in the future. Aysia claims that she actually saw one of the missing person posters of Celeste, and she was able to identify that that was the girl she thought was dating David.
That's something I can talk to you guys about, though. Okay, so there's a screenshot going around of me texting someone in 2024, right? And it's like this random girl that I'm not even close with. I think I worked with her one time, and that's why we were mutuals. So I can actually break down exactly what happened there because everyone's a little confused. I didn't feel like I was able to talk about this because I didn't know what was legally acceptable, or if I talked about something, it was like tampering with evidence. You know what I mean? I texted this girl because I see this, you know, the missing poster, and I'm like, yo, that's my friend's girlfriend, because I knew David was dating this girl. That's common knowledge, right? So I respond back, and on the missing poster, unfortunately, what people don't understand is you can't see the screenshot that girl had posted. You couldn't see her age. You couldn't see really much info. So that's why I had responded, and I was like, hey, like, I was genuinely just concerned for her. I was like, hey, this is my friend's girlfriend. Like, you know, what's going on?
This is where the most disturbing part of this story comes into play. Aysia claims that once she saw the missing person poster, she tried to get clarity on the situation. The person told her this missing individual is 13. Now, Aysia, knowing that David had been quote-unquote dating this missing person, she goes to David and asks for proof that Celeste was not 13 and instead 19, like David had told her. And David had somehow actually shown her proof.
And then she goes, can you confirm she's 13? Of course, I go, what the fuck? Okay, because obviously that's a big thing to say. And David used to be my homie. So I'm like, oh nah, my close homie's fucking with a minor? Hell no, I don't fuck with that shit. So immediately I go to David. And I'm like, hey, this girl's saying that you're fucking with a fucking 13-year-old. You need to explain yourself. He was like, dude, that's not even true. Like, she's like 19. And I was like, no, she's not. She said she's 13. Like, show me proof. And you know what? He showed me proof. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna back off. I feel like I'm harassing my friend. Obviously, now that's a little too much. And obviously there was more conversation than that. I can't get into every single detail for legal reasons. But I didn't just go, oh, hey, is your friend 13? And he went, no. And I was like, oh, okay, la 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 la. Like, I wasn't being stupid. I was like, no, show me proof. I need to see actual evidence because I think you're f***ing with a minor. And obviously when my friend tells me, he's like, no, I'm not, shows me proof that he is not, and I harass him more, and he's like, dude, like, chill the fuck out. Like, manipulated the fuck out of me, to be honest. I was like, okay, like, honestly, I'm tripping. Geez, okay, I'm a layoff. You know what I mean? So that's pretty much the explanation with the screenshot. I know a lot of people have been wanting me to talk about it, but the sad thing about the internet is I could give you guys all the information in the world. Y'all still will not believe me.
Aysia also claims that when all this went down, she immediately removed herself from the situation and left David's tour. She took a break from social media when the news hit the internet and claims that she's now been cooperating with authorities to make sure that she's able to help in any way she possibly could.
I have not protected anyone. The moment investigators wanted to speak to me, I told them everything I knew because I just wanted to, whatever information I can give, I just wanted to help. But yeah, I mean, people were saying that I'm protecting certain people the very moment I found out about this shit. I mean, like, even on tour, when this stuff happened, I immediately flew away from that tour. Like, I've just been terrified ever since. I took, like, a fat hiatus, obviously, from socials because this is honestly crazy. I'll probably be taking another break from socials due to the way that this shit's happening. Yeah, people are deadass crazy. This is wild. Anyways, yeah, I know a lot of people are like, oh yeah, maybe just take a break from things. I took a break for like 8 months, but people forget, like, I do enjoy, like, making content and being on social media, and if I didn't do anything wrong, I don't really understand why I have to. I've been so respectful to the case, even when I wanted to go on the internet and just start, like, rambling about everything going on, I stayed quiet for the respect of, you know, information not getting tampered with, and for everything to go directly to investigators. But, you know, like, honestly, there's really nothing I can do to make things better.
Now, while Aysia did claim to have taken a break from social media after this case was made public, there is some strange content circulating online where people were questioning whether or not she was potentially subliminally talking about David. Her name.
Hey, what's up? Would you be down to be in some content with me? Sure, yeah, I could be down. What would we be doing? Oh, I'm going to exploit you, sexualize you, and then embarrass you on stream. Wait, what? Oh, My bad. I meant we're gonna go on like a date on stream. I don't really know if. Oh, and I have a girlfriend, by the way, like a secret one, but don't mind her. Then why not make content with her? It's just content. It's not like my girl like cares or anything. Like, sure, she might spam call me because she feels like I'm cheating on her, but like she understands because it's work. Right.
But it seems to be her mocking the David and Celeste situation, proving that she knew about them being in a relationship. If talking about them, she goes on to claim the person she's referring to, that's unnamed, claims the guy exploits her, sexualizes her, and then it proceeds to embarrass her.
So as you can see, that's a TikTok of Aysia talking about a friend she made content with who had a secret girlfriend that would get mad at David for cheating on her, but it didn't matter. They could pretend to be girlfriend and boyfriend on stream regardless. Rolling Stone recently published an article diving into their own investigation related to the David case, and they actually alleged that it wasn't just Celeste, but David maintained other online intense relationships with other young women. There was a Jane Doe that says she was first messaged by David in summer of 2022. This is when his music career initially took off. Eventually, they were texting and calling each other regularly. And according to this Jane Doe, David, who was 18 at the time, was often a caring and attentive friend, but could also be stern and on a few occasions unnerving. Once, Jane Doe had been joking with David about Atami, which is an evil manga-style alter ego that David had created for his music videos, who would commit crimes that David would have to solve. Jane Doe joked that she could beat Atami in a karate fight, saying that David claims I can never beat Atami in a fight. David joked about him and Atami doing a violent act towards me, cutting my arms off. It was a joke, but it came out of nowhere. David ended their relationship in mid-2023, Jane Doe claims, saying that they weren't at the same quote-unquote maturity level and different stages of life. She claims that David was touring, he had a music career starting, and she was in high school. Unbeknownst to Jane Doe, David allegedly began his relationship with Celeste not long after. Jane Doe says, I feel like she got the worst version of him, a different version. It just really shocked and saddened me. It's disgusting to think that Celeste may have possibly not been David's only victim. And as far as where the case stands, David's next hearing is scheduled for late August, but he's still currently incarcerated. And Law and Crime had done a bit of a deep dive into the possible conditions in prison that David is currently faced with, how he spends his day-to-day.
I want to go into a little bit about what his life seems to be like. People magazine reported on some of these apparent details of David's life, like how he's in a single jail cell, which you mentioned, constantly monitored, that this is reportedly a place where a source told people the inmates, and you mentioned this too, housed there have mental health needs, that they're kept apart from other inmates. You look at his schedule, so that he's apparently, according to this reporting, housed in Tower 1, Section 142. Again, these single cells separated from others, 24-hour monitoring. He can leave his cell for limited periods of movement, but he has to be monitored, usually by a sheriff's sergeant with a body-worn camera. What is that life like? What is that experience like? Like, what does his day-to-day look like?
I mean, when he's not going to court, or let's just say if he's going for a hearing, they'll wake him up about 4 or 5 a.m., get him a cold, continental type breakfast, get him taken down to the booking area to where they're going to transport him over to the courthouse. He'll spend the day there and then he'll come back. But if he's there on the housing unit, they'll wake him up for breakfast. And then if he doesn't have a shower in his cell, every 3 days, they will escort him out for a shower. And again, what we would call that 3-man hold in the federal system. So you'd have 2 staff members there and a supervisor. In this case, would be a sergeant. We would have a lieutenant, and then we would escort this high-profile person out, whether it's high-profile based on their celebrity, their crime, or if they're may cause physical harm to the staff. And then we would, anytime that person moved, whether it's to talk on the phone, whether it's to go to recreation, whether it's go to court, or whether it was to come out to talk to law enforcement or talk to his attorney or what visitation, they're going to move with someone. And typically you'll get recreation five days out of the week. He'll get the shower out, 3 days outside of the cell. And depending on and then the commissary and all that kind of stuff. If he has money on his books, they would bring that to him. But he would spend the vast majority of his time in that single cell. But staff will be, other than them escorting him, every 15 to 30 minutes, you're going to have staff making rounds to check on, do a welfare check. You're going to have health services staff coming to see him. You're going to have mental health clinicians. They're going to be coming by to see him on a day-to-day basis. His counselors, case managers, other officials. So he'll be seen and he'll talk to staff most of the time, but most of his time will actually be spent behind that cell.
And what does he do in the cell? What can he do in the cell?
Well, he can have his toiletries. He can have limited, I'm assuming he's probably given a limited amount of commissary. He'll have access to some of his legal materials. He can have writing utensils, pens, pads, and that thing. But it'll be a pen that, one of these rubber type pens. It won't be anything that he can turn into what we call a shank to harm someone or harm himself. And any medical equipment that he may need, his medications, if he's on any medications, if he has sleep apnea, he'd have that machine in there in the cell, 1 or 2 blankets, a sheet, a pillow, very limited amount of property that he would have in there. And then staff should be shaking down or doing cell searches when they move him out to court or to recreation to make sure that he's not, creating any shanks or what we call homemade knives or anything like that to try to harm himself or someone else.
Let's talk about the food. So reportedly, according to people, he eats 3 meals a day. That law enforcement sources say that breakfast is served around 6 a.m., lunch between 10:30 and 11 a.m., dinner at around 5 p.m. It feels like the day is centered around the meals. Like it seems to be those would be the big events that you look out for and you wait for. And what is the food actually like, generally speaking? I don't know if you know what the menu is. Like people reported that the Twin Towers facility might have a better menu, but I don't know. I mean, what is he typically looking like he's eating?
Probably in the mornings and the lunchtime, it'll probably be more cold foods. Like, for breakfast, it'll be like cereal, milk, maybe some fruit or some sort of breakfast cake or some sort of pastry. And then lunchtime, again, probably some cold cuts. Now, I don't know what type of diet he's on. Some people, inmates come in with religious diets or, they don't want to eat flesh and that kind of thing. So let's say if he doesn't eat flesh, they'll probably give him a peanut butter sandwich or some crackers or something like that, or a sandwich if he does eat flesh. And then your dinner meal is probably going to be your one warm meal for the day. And I can tell you, most jails and have standards through the American Corrections Association. So they'll typically have, like a hamburger day, chicken day, fish, spaghetti, school pizza, like I was served, in public schools in California, so there's little square little pizzas that they would give out. So it would be something sort of that nature, and it would be balanced to make sure that, he's getting a healthy diet. Of course, based on the amount of people they're serving there, obviously the taste and the quality is probably not going to be as good as you would get at home or maybe in a high-end restaurant like he may be used to, but it will be edible enough because the staff there, at least some of the administrative staff there, should be testing and tasting those meals each and every day to make sure if they could eat it, then it can be served to the population.
Now, this video really sadly just scratches the surface of all the horrifying evidence prosecutors have already presented in court related to David's relationship with Celeste. And I broke down every piece of evidence that was presented throughout the preliminary hearing of this case in a previous video. So I'll leave a link to that video in the description of this one. And let's just pray that ultimately Celeste and her family can get the justice that they deserve. Rest in peace to Celeste Rivas Hernandez.